of the Beyond 2022 research project, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all here to St. Patrick's Hall in Dublin Castle today, and to welcome the many friends joining us online from around the country and overseas for the launch of the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland. The Virtual Treasury is the result of a deep and generous partnership between historians, archivists and computer scientists. So in particular, I would like to acknowledge the directors of our 5 core partner institutions: the National Archives Ireland, the National Archives of the United Kingdom, the Public Record Office Northern Ireland, the Irish Manuscripts Commission, and the Library Trinity College Dublin. The entire Virtual Treasury is only possible because of the truly innovative computer science research undertaken at the SFI ADAPT Centre for AI-driven digital content, and I'm particularly pleased to welcome colleagues from ADAPT here today. I'm also glad to welcome members of the Expert Advisory Group on Centenary Commemorations, chaired by Dr. Maurice Manning, and we have really appreciated their endorsement of our research through our work. The venue where we are gathered is particularly appropriate, as just a few steps behind me is the original medieval tower where Irish record keeping began. And it was to the castle and the record tower in the opposite direction that the staff of the Public Record Office came when their premises in the forecourts were occupied in April 1922. So it's wonderful to be able to welcome here to this venue so many archivists, librarians and conservators, the people who protect Ireland's documentary heritage, and to acknowledge all of your generosity, partnership and support in the work of reconstructing virtually the collections that were lost a century ago. Today's event is being live streamed and recording will be available online, so as in all good archives and libraries, I'd ask you to turn your mobile phones to silent, please, but do feel free to take your own photographs and you don't need to fill out a permission slip. The hashtag we're using if you are tweeting on social media is #VirtualTreasury. This morning we will hear from a number of distinguished speakers and see 2 short videos. The first demonstrating the power and the fun of the Virtual Treasury for users at all levels of experience, and the second giving a taste of a really beautiful video artwork entitled The Nick of Time, being created by our Decade of Centenaries artist in residence, Mairead McLean. Our first speaker has been a supporter of the Beyond 2022 research programme since the beginning. In her previous role as Vice President for Research at Trinity College Dublin and Professor of Engineering and the Arts, she immediately grasped both the challenge and the potential of what we were trying to do. So I'm delighted to introduce her in her current role as Provost of Trinity College Dublin. Please welcome Dr. Linda Doyle.
Thank you, Kieran. I'm delighted to be here with you all today, particularly with the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, Minister Catherine Martin, Chief Justice, Ambassadors, and all of those wonderful people involved in Beyond 2022 under the guidance of Peter and Kieran. In 3 days' time, it'll be 100 years since the Public Record Office of Ireland was destroyed. I think that's a really, really, I suppose, it's just amazing to be here in that context. Within a few hours, as we know, 7 centuries of records went up in smoke. And when I was thinking about this, I realized that we are living in a time where this actually isn't a thing of the past. We unfortunately live in a world where the destruction of the past is all too present. So therefore, I think it's even more joyous to be here today, where we're actually celebrating a reconstruction of the past through this incredible virtual record treasury of Ireland. I agree with Kieran in all he said, that this has only come about because of a very amazing group of people. We have fantastic researchers involved at the core of the project, crossing from arts humanities into STEM, We have amazing collaborators. Kieran, I know you've mentioned them already, but I do want to call out the National Archives, the Public Record of Northern Ireland, the National Archives of the United Kingdom, the Irish Manuscripts Commission and Trinity College Dublin Library team, who've played an incredible role in this. But why we're here today, and what we're going to see today, is the result of the most wonderful technology, spearheaded by the SFI Adapt Research Centre and Vinnie Wade and his team there, which has given us this unique technical platform that will enable archives around the world to be explored by the public at large. And I think that's pretty amazing. I have to say, from the very beginning, I've loved this project, and I love it for so many reasons. First of all, it teaches us about commemoration. It's not always easy to commemorate events. And through Beyond 2022, and this archive in particular, we can negotiate the past in new and nuanced and very inclusive ways, especially negotiating a past when the battles at the time were so polarizing. For me, it is really important that it shows how arts, humanities and STEM come together. This is real interdisciplinary work. Each of these areas are in tight collaboration here, in service of each other and benefiting also individually. What we're talking about here is a group of people who've pushed technology to its extremes, and we're also talking about historians who've pushed history through the technology and with the technologists. And I think it's just a fantastic example of how these kind of cross-disciplinary works can come together. It's also about the past and the future. The virtual record allows us to dig deeper into the past. It allows us also to I suppose, think of colleagues of the past, of Shay, who we lost through this. And it also allows us to push the future, to push the boundaries of the future. And most importantly, it's about democratizing access, making all of this available to the public as it should be. So that's why I say I absolutely love the project, because it encompasses, I think, things that are so special and so important. When I was actually in my role as Vice President of Research, one of the questions I used to be asked very often is kind of, what is research for? And it was one of those questions actually that used to kind of slightly drive me crazy. And when I stand back and look at this project and I look at all that it encompasses, I can say this is what research is for. The research that has happened here is bringing us together in new and different ways. The research that has happened here allows us understand our country, allows us remember, it allows us look to the future, it pushes technology, it does much more, and for me is no greater proof that funding research is worthwhile in all its various forms. So at that point, I would like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank the Taoiseach, to thank Minister Martin and her officials, to thank the Expert Advisory Group on Commemorations. I really do want to congratulate the Trinity researchers who are at the heart of all of this. It was an amazing idea at the beginning. It was an idea that captured the imagination, captured the heart and soul, I think, as well. And I'm so glad to see the fruit it has borne. And one of the things I think that's really interesting about this project, this is not a project that is ending today. This is a project that's beginning a huge new phase. And for me, that's a new phase of how we can continue in terms of how we commemorate. It's a phase about how we can archive right into the future and much more. I'd also like to thank the archives in Ireland and internationally who have joined forces to make this lost treasure a reality that we can now experience. And now I will invite the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, to address you all. So thank you.
Well, Minister Catherine Martin, and indeed Provost Trinity Linda, and indeed the Director of the project, Professor Crooks, Chief Justice, Honourable Donal O'Donnell, Ambassadors, Deputy Director Kieran, and ladies and gentlemen, dúspara go mar ága priviléid an bhór domsa I láthir an seo mar híiseach chun an tugra seo chuir fíle an seol go hifigiúil agus rá tugra den sco, den chéad sco atá going an seo stochlete an méid atá déinte, an méid ibre atá choristeach ag an bhuireann galéir, agus na blianta atá le tacht. Beag annach chud bhuine ag buin tarafa as an méid ibre atá déinte anseo, agus an áis úntach seo inis atá chora ar fáil de muinter an dain, agus bhhainamach go gádagus a dhéanamh le an talamh crux agus an bhuireann galéir as socht an méid atá buinte amach a goibh dochrite ar fad go gádagus live. Throughout the decade of centenaries, we have worked with stakeholders across the island to remember significant events in our shared history in an inclusive, sensitive and meaningful way. 2022 is a particularly complex commemorative year as we look back 100 years to our Civil War, a painful and deeply personal centenary for many. 2022 is a particularly complex commemorative year as given not just the trauma and the pain, but the degree to which for many of us and many families it has personal resonance. The destruction of the Public Record Office of Ireland at the Four Courts in the opening engagement of the Civil War was a catastrophe. 7 centuries of Ireland's deep history were destroyed in one afternoon, a devastating and seemingly irrecoverable archival loss of our cultural heritage and collective memory, and a traumatic legacy of our Civil War. The scale of destruction in 1922 was near total. The record treasury was completely consumed by the fire, the reading room survived but was badly damaged, and the strong room protected some documents and finding aids. It was a reasonable, although mistaken, belief that everything was lost forever. Herbert Wood, Deputy Keeper, was among the first to survey the damage to the Public Record Office on the 2nd of July. The Minister for Finance, Michael Collins, also visited the Four Courts on that day and noted in his diary that the site must be secured to protect what remained. Within days, the Office of Public Works received official notification from Michael Collins that coordination of the salvage effort was its responsibility. On the 13th of July, John Challoner Smith, a structural engineer for the OPW, was appointed to take charge of this operation. By the 17th of July, staff of the Public Record Office were permitted to begin the momentous task of retrieving documents from the rubble of the record treasury. Led by James Morrissey, Assistant Deputy Keeper, they gathered, sorted and identified what they could find among the ruins. In just under a year, they packed 25,000 sheets of paper and parchment into almost 400 bundles. Everything retrieved was wrapped in brown paper, labelled and secured with string. The National Archives, as successor institution to the Public Record Office, has held these records, salvaged from the 1922 fire, in its care for almost a century, and has now begun the process of conservation with the support of the Irish Manuscripts Commission. This work represents a significant contribution to the state's key legacy project for the decade of centenaries. 100 years later, we celebrate the magnificent restoration in virtual reality of the Public Record Office building and its archival collections. It is an occasion for joy and pride, the culmination of 6 years of partnership and collaboration led by the dedicated project team in Trinity College Dublin to bring this exciting and ambitious project to fruition. Today is not without sadness too. Your friend and colleague, the late Dr. Seamus Lawless, is deeply missed. He left a wonderful, imaginative and pioneering legacy which will transform and greatly enrich how we learn about our past. I would like to acknowledge Shay's parents, his wife Pamela, and his family who are here today. This must be a very moving occasion for you all. The Virtual Record Treasury offers an enduring legacy for our decade of centenaries. It is an invaluable historical resource for people of all traditions across the island and for everyone of Irish heritage around the world. It is an immense achievement and testament to the commitment and dedication of the Beyond 2022 project team and the archival partners. The Virtual Treasury belongs to the people of Ireland, democratising access to our rich archival heritage and making our shared history accessible and engaging for everyone. The beautiful reading room has been meticulously recreated with the smallest architectural details faithfully preserved, just as it appeared on the eve of the fire. The archival boxes on the virtual shelves link to saved or substitute records held by archival repositories around the world. The project ethos throughout has been characterised by trust, openness, partnership, and a generosity of spirit deriving from a shared ideal and common goal on an unprecedented scale in this field. The results of this mutual goodwill and the resulting all-island and international collaborations are extraordinary. The contributions from the core archival partners and all of the participating organisations, over 70 in total, are greatly appreciated. It is a timely opportunity to acknowledge the invaluable role of archives and libraries spanning across Europe, North America, Australia, and further afield. As custodians of Irish heritage, our international archival partners highlight Irish history and culture for a global audience. The Virtual Record Treasury will offer a substantial, freely available research and teaching resource for Irish studies programmes in academic institutions around the world. I would like to acknowledge the research carried out by the computer science team in the ADAPT Centre, because this project is in essence a marriage of history and technology. And those from a history background who went through many parchments never thought we'd be so reliant or appreciative of the world of technology, but it really has come into its own in the context of this particular project. Because the imaginative and groundbreaking data framework of the ADAPT Centre and the team there has reunited historical records separated across continents and scattered for a century. The innovative technology behind the knowledge graph for the Irish history underscores Ireland's reputation as a world-class leader in the field of technological innovation and cutting-edge research. The knowledge graph illuminates and interlinks a wealth of evidence about people and place across Irish history. The project's positive restoration of a critical loss of archival heritage will resonate with many other international experiences of cultural loss. Each record or fragment adds layers of meaning. What was previously unknown, indecipherable, or obscure is now accessible, allowing for new perspectives and a richer understanding of the complex relationships forged over centuries with our neighbours. These exciting new knowledge graph technologies allow all visitors to navigate the rich digitised collections of the Virtual Treasury with ease, making connections spanning centuries between people, places, and official administration. This is a completely new and imaginative approach to making our shared history engaging and interesting for everyone, revealing many fascinating aspects of everyday life across the island. I cannot overstate my interest in this project. The scale of this achievement is quite simply breathtaking. Throughout the decade of centenaries, the Expert Advisory Group on Centenary Commissions, and welcome Maurice Manning, who's here today, has advocated for meaningful opportunities that will encourage original research and scholarship to flourish. As a student of history, I am fascinated by the potential of the Virtual Record Treasury to transform how we approach local research and local history studies. And today is a timely opportunity to acknowledge the great contribution of local historians, librarians, genealogists, and custodians of archives in furthering fields of study that lead us to a more nuanced engagement with local, regional, national, and international events. By bringing stories from the personal realm into the public domain, we gain a much richer understanding of our history in all of its complexity. Free public access to this wealth of digitised archival material will encourage new generations of historians and genealogists, professional and amateur, to share previously unexplored stories and narratives which have left their imprint in our collective memories and on the local landscape. It is worth taking a moment to acknowledge the extraordinary nature of the archival collection, which was lost in 1922. The continuous collection of a state-level archive spanning 7 centuries meant that the lost treasury was one of the great archives of Europe, a loss not only for Ireland, but for world heritage. When we see what has survived around the world, the sheer scale and geographical spread of the archival diaspora has been a revelation. The extraordinary materials comprising of the medieval gold seam are particularly exciting, dating back to the earliest points of political and administrative connection between Ireland and England. The partnership with the National Archives United Kingdom has resulted in the digitalisation of the largest collection of original parchment documents concerning medieval Ireland to survive anywhere in the world. Everyone can freely access a wealth of information dating back to the 13th century about society, economy and politics in the centuries after Ireland was conquered. We have fresh insights into many different aspects of everyday life across most of the island: the distribution of wealth and power, war and diplomacy, trade and economic activity, law and land holding, religion and political culture. The parchments reveal how Ireland was administered by and for the English crown. The attention to detail is noteworthy. The meticulous preparation of the parchment, especially prepared animal skin, usually that of sheep or goat, which was used before paper was commonly available. The records were written up by the clerks working in the Irish Exchequer in triplicate. A copy remained in Ireland, with the others being sent to the English Exchequer in Westminster for audit. They remained there for centuries, first at Westminster, later in the Tower of London, and now held at the National Archives UK. The 17th century brought extraordinary upheaval across Ireland with the wholesale confiscation of land. Ireland became the most intensively surveyed and mapped country in the world during this time. The Virtual Record Treasury brings together for the first time the key maps and documents describing this transformation of ownership and power on the island, including the maps of the Down Survey of Ireland and the books of survey and distribution. They are an astonishing record of Irish place and locality in a traumatic time of change. Next year, the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, PRONI, will mark the centenary of its establishment, serving as the official archive for Northern Ireland. The early staff of PRONI had worked in the Public Record Office in Dublin, notably David A. Chart. The collections that David Chart and his colleagues gathered in PRONI illuminate the history of the whole island, but are particularly rich for the 18th century. PRONI has been extraordinarily generous in sharing this wealth of material with the Beyond 2022 research project and hosting a research fellow in Belfast to explore their collections over the past 2 years. The Beyond 2022 research project has made it possible to open up digital access for the first time to one of the most substantial and significant holdings in Washington, D.C., the manuscript collections of the Library of Congress to audiences on both sides of the Atlantic. The transcripts of the debates of the Irish House of Commons, 1776 to 1789, comprises 78 volumes of manuscripts, which give a fascinating insight into the dissemination of ideas and debate in the chamber of the Irish House of Commons following the American Declaration of Independence. 5 volumes of this material are now searchable online, with further riches to follow. The history of the Irish Parliament in the late 18th century resonates with parliamentary democracies worldwide. It is interesting that while the documents record the everyday lives of people in Ireland in extraordinary detail, there were very few Irish language records in the Public Record Office. The Record Office required Irish language as a linguistic attainment among its staff. Indeed, it was the first government department to have an Irish language requirement. Samuel Ferguson, the first deputy keeper, was politically a unionist. He was also a poet who studied and wrote about the Irish language and translated ancient Irish literature. There is so much more to be explored and said as we delve deeper into the riches contained within these archival collections. I would like to thank Minister Catherine Martin for her department's support for this really groundbreaking and significant project. I'm looking forward, as I know many of you are too, to diving into the virtual shelves in the weeks and months ahead. Thanks to everybody again, and the team under Peter's direction for your work and for your invitation to join you this morning. I wish you all the very best in your endeavours. Go to Mila Mahogov, Galer, Guscana Roy Gontal.
Thank you, Taoiseach, for those kind remarks. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce the person who managed to keep the whole complex three-dimensional chess game that is the Virtual Treasury clear in his mind, miraculously, for the past few years. Please welcome Senior Lecturer in Medieval History at the Department of History, Trinity College, Dublin, and Director Beyond 2022, my colleague, Dr. Peter Crooks.
Kieran Taoiseach, Minister, Provost, partners, colleagues, friends. 100 years ago on this day, the 27th of June, an obscure document inscribed with a Latin maxim sat high up on its shelf in the Record Treasury in the Four Courts. And the Latin maxim ran, Memoria vadit, litera custodit. Memory passes, the letter preserves. Or maybe memory fades, writing persists. And on that day, the Public Record Office of Ireland stood still intact but in peril. And as we know, 3 days later, it was consumed in civil war and destroyed. The danger was widely foreseen. At the end of May 1922, the president of the Royal Society of Antiquaries of Ireland wrote to both the offices of Eamon de Valera and Arthur Griffith, and he conveyed in unmistakable terms why the Record Office mattered. And he described, quote, how disastrous it would be for the nation, the term is significant, if any of the archives should suffer any harm. He continued, masses of records from all parts of the country and of very various kinds have been accumulated there over the last 50 years. Remember how short the lifespan of the Public Record Office was from 1867 to its end in 1922 in the fire. And he continued, it would be impossible in a short space to give any idea of the variety of the documents deposited in the Public Record Office, but the loss of all or any of these documents would be irreparable. The author's name was Michael J. McHenry. Michael J. McHenry was a Limerick-born man and Catholic and a lifetime servant of the Public Record Office. He joined the staff at a junior grade in 1882, and 32 years later, he became deputy keeper as the chief archivist. That was in 1914, just as war broke out in Europe. And in that time of his career, the Record Office itself, its physical space, had expanded. It was maybe a third full when he joined, and by 1912, it had reached capacity. McHenry was the man in charge at Easter 1916, when the Four Courts was taken over. On that occasion, only one document was lost. And he retired in 1921, just months before Easter 1922, when the Four Courts was occupied for a second time. And in retirement and in a new role as president of the Antiquaries, he had every reason to worry because of how much he knew. McHenry's scholarly work as an editor covered at least 6 centuries of Irish history, from the earliest exchequer pipe rolls which were originally stored in the tower, the medieval tower, just behind this room, to the early modern deeds of Christchurch Cathedral. And it was McHenry too who transcribed and translated and published in 1898 the few Irish language documents that Taoiseach referred to a few moments ago in the Public Record Office collection. And it's in the earliest of those Irish language documents, dated 1584, that we find that haunting phrase about memory and writing with which I opened. In the document, two branches of the O'Kennedys of Ballycapel in County Tipperary have submitted themselves to an arbitration under Irish law, not English law, a system that permitted the testimony of female witnesses. And having taken their evidence, the Brehon judges advised that the new division of land should be made and, quote, set down in writing for fear of oblivion, and for this reason, that writing is better than memory. As it is said, and here's the Latin tag, memoria vadit, litera custodit, that writing lives, this is McHenry's translation now, and memory departs, or memory fades, and writing persists. This is an extraordinary glimpse of the past. It's proof that every salvageable fragment from 1922 has value. The Irish legal tradition it records here was in 1584 itself on the point of being swept away forever. And it encapsulates perfectly the jostling between memory and written record, or between written memory and oral tradition that is a wider aspect of the human story at large. Well, that almost unique Irish language document, along with hundreds of thousands of others dating from 1173 and on, in Latin and in French and early English and in modern English, were consumed in the flames of 1922. So writing perished. What of memory? In 1996, UNESCO's Memory of the World programme published a report on cultural loss, specifically dealing with the destruction of archives and libraries during the 20th century. Its title is Lost Memory. It was written in the shadow of atrocities in Bosnia and cultural disaster in Sarajevo. And in that UNESCO report, with its unstinting enumeration of cultural loss through armed conflicts and through environmental disaster, Ireland's archival tragedy in 1922 does not appear. It was as if the memory of our lost memory had itself been lost. And that forgetting of 1922, as Professor Guy Biner has really recently termed it, forgetting 1922, that was in a way our starting point when we began, only 7 years ago, to look ahead towards the centenary of the fire. The first task was to remember, to recall into consciousness the magnificent archive that was the record treasury before the fire. The beyond in Beyond 2022, for me, always had a double meaning. It was an invitation to look to the future, to the long term, beyond the immediate horizon of a specific centenary, to something lasting, living, hopeful, a meaningful legacy that would reach the widest number of people at home and abroad. But it was also an invitation to delve deep, not to be blinded by the belch of smoke from the forecourts in 1922, and instead to celebrate the remarkable documentary heritage this island still enjoys. Ireland has a rich, complex, difficult history. And despite the losses of 100 years ago, we have a vein of evidence stretching back centuries through which a rich, complex, difficult story can be unfurled. It is really only, for me, now, through the process of recovery, that we can fully comprehend what McHenry tried to put into words 1 month before the end came, the true value of the record treasury, as Taoiseach says, one of the magnificent archives of Europe. Yes, these were the records that originated with English governing institutions in Ireland, with intrusive and extractive administrative structures, authenticated by symbols, such as this wax impression of a Great Seal of Majesty from an English monarch, this one a reproduction, but dating back to the time of John, before he became king. That's the late 12th century. John, among other things, instrumental in creating this castle where we sit today. But they were also Ireland's public records. It's in the nature of a state-level archive everywhere, a historic archive, that its documents reflect the prevailing power structures. Historians are trained precisely to read such evidence against the archival grain, or if they choose, they may ply their trade along the archival grain and explore how the archive itself is a social force, how it regiments and enumerates and counts and controls knowledge and therefore power. These are important questions. Within that context, what the Treasury contained was one story of Ireland from 1172 to 1922, that famous 750-year span, a story of invasion and confiscation, of immigration and emigration, of opportunity and denial, and that the lost archive could be reconstructed in minute detail down to bundle numbers and shelf locations was the first great revelation for us. Suddenly we had thousands of hooks onto which to peg any fragment of salvage. The second revelation is how much survives to replace what was lost in the fire. We were not dealing in fragments. The scale of our challenge was the challenge of scale. The example that Taoiseach gave of the medieval gold seam is one particularly close to my heart as a medievalist. It's been a matter of great personal happiness for me that the project has provided a long-sought opportunity to collaborate with the National Archives UK and its principal medieval record specialist, Dr. Paul Dryborough, on this really significant corpus of early material. And in that same spirit of finding these rich veins of evidence, archival discovery, led by my colleague Dr. David Brown in Dublin and coordinated in London by Dr. Neil Johnson of the National Archives UK, this has been the great success story, I think, of this work. And so in addressing that challenge of scale, I want to pay tribute and acknowledge here the presence of the project's 5 core partners, the National Archives, and its director, Orla McBride, who is the direct successor of McHenry and Herbert Wood and those names that we've heard of from a century ago, as well as her colleagues in the National Archives UK, the Public Record Office Northern Ireland, Irish Manuscripts Commission and the Library of Trinity College Dublin. Watching the collaboration develop between these institutions, not just between the project and the institutions, but between the partners, has really been one of the great joys and I hope legacies of our work. For the past 2 years, a dedicated team of historical researchers funded through the Minister's Department has worked side by side with those archivists in London and Belfast and Dublin, and they are here today. I want to welcome them, thank them. They are remarkable colleagues, passionately committed to pursuing this work to the highest possible standards and in a relatively short time frame. And spinning out from that small core team, the work has been embraced by our partners, digitization specialists, conservators, records managers, committed themselves, often in very difficult circumstances amid public health restrictions in the last 2 years, to complete safely a program of digitization and conservation on which this entire virtual edifice stands. Collaborations have deepened, but they have also broadened. Now nearly 70 additional repositories, local, regional, national, island-wide bodies and international memory institutions have joined this common enterprise, and we have room for more. The generosity extends to many private depositors and private archives who permitted the digitization to take place or who made digital donations. And although the project is virtual and digital, I really do think that it has brought out to the fore and into the public imagination the fundamental importance of the physical record and its preservation, the value that all these institutions and partners bring in being the custodians of Irish heritage, Irish manuscript heritage around the world. So on behalf of this entire consortium, which represents literally hundreds of individuals whose contributions have accumulated to a priceless centenary digital offering, I would like to convey my personal thanks to Taoiseach Micheál Martin and Minister Martin and their officials, especially the officials involved in the Decade of Centenaries programme, for their remarkable support. You have nurtured this project and you have worked to protect its future. Sustainability, technical, intellectual, infrastructural sustainability, has been a whole work package in itself. And here we have benefited from our international cultural and scientific advisory panel, chaired by Professor Lorna Hughes, who I welcome today. And with their advice, we have enshrined for the project a set of guiding principles that should shape its future direction. The foundational principle being the one the Taoiseach mentioned, democratizing access. What was lost were the public's records, and they are restored in digital form, open and free of access to the public forever. I'm so appreciative of the generous remarks of the Provost, who has been a champion of this work since 2018, as well as my colleagues who I see here in medieval history and in Irish history from the Department of History at Trinity. Many of you contributed magnificently and significantly in terms of expertise and digital content to the project's work in progress. I want to thank the Expert Advisory Group on Centenary Commemorations, in particular Dr. Manning, who I welcome, and Dr. Mansura, the Chair and Vice Chair, for the confidence they bestowed on us in 2019 in identifying this as an appropriate legacy for the Decade of Centenaries. The core project's activities were extended by generous funding from an anonymous foundation, which enabled us to bring to light for the first time Ireland's first census of 1766, the religious census, and generous philanthropy from Dublin Port Company, from William and Pamela Lowe, who I know are joining us from America today, from the Trinity Trust, and others nurtured specific work packages and contributed to the whole. In ADAPT, the Science Foundation Ireland-funded Centre for Digital Content, where the project and its technological development has been hosted within Trinity, I'm enormously grateful to Professors Vinnie Wade, Declan O'Sullivan, and Owen Conlon. They've become very close colleagues of mine and friends, and have been extraordinarily generous in sharing their time and expertise. The technical platform they have created is, I think, an entirely new contribution, not only to the Irish cultural landscape, but to the international archival community. ADAPT has pointed the sector to the future and brought the awesome power of the semantic web within our grasp. The energy and inspirational designs of our creative partners in EBO in web design and Neil Hushin and his colleagues in NoHo in computer graphics will, I think, inspire a whole new generation to engage with this centenary moment, and I hope also take their first steps in research into the past. I have three personal remarks, if you'll indulge me. The first is to my family. I have a very patient family, Helen and my two daughters, Emily and Olivia. I happen to know the exact date on which this project was born as an idea. It was the 21st of September 2015, which was Emily's 5th birthday. Olivia was not yet 3. They are now 11 and 9. And so most of their lives they've grown up wondering what will happen beyond the beyond. When you visit the virtual reading room later, you will see captions on the records where they've been left on the desks. The readers have just left the office. These were carefully vetted and rewritten by my little co-workers so children everywhere can enjoy them. Watch out in particular for the foul-smelling dog kennel from 1705. I won't say which city it was in, but I'm very proud that, thanks to them, the project has a historically validated bit with a dog. Second profound debt is to very close colleagues. Dr. Ciarán Wallace, Deputy Director. It's my recollection that in the spring of 2016, it may have been shortly after the Easter centenary, I asked Ciarán to meet me for coffee near Trinity because I'd said, I've had an idea. And we have been in almost daily contact ever since. And I could not, everybody who knows Ciarán will know this is true, you could not ask for a wiser, stronger, kinder fellow traveller on this journey. He is a communicator of brilliance, and together with our indispensable programme manager, he has masterminded with our partners a programme of engagement for the centenary, a century of recovery and beyond. So thank you, Ciarán. Likewise, Zoe Reid, now keeper of the National Archives. I'm as proud of that accomplishment as anybody. It was in 2017 that Zoe first invited me into the conservation lab, which was her realm, maybe still is, of the National Archives in 2017. And the thrill of smelling the smoke of a century ago arising, this is true, from the first unboxing of some of these 1922 salved records, that stays with anybody who experiences it for the rest of their lives. And Zoe and I together would like to thank all our colleagues in the National Archives in particular, whose magnificent contributions underpin so much of the digital content we are sharing today. In particular, I'm thinking of Hazel Menton and Mary Mackey and Tom Quinlan, who retired about 9 months ago. And of course, the team that has worked on those captivating 1922 salved records, Jessica Baldwin and Ciara Fahy in particular. And finally, of course, present in all our minds, and particularly in these last 6 weeks, has been our friend, the co-founder of the project, Dr. Seamus Wallace, who we lost 3 years ago. It's wonderful to welcome Pam and Emma and Shay's family and parents. Shay's optimism was irrepressible, and his boundless energy has carried us forward like a wave in these last 3 years. I think Shay would be proud today, proud for Trinity's School of Computer Science, proud for ADAPT and his colleagues, proud for digital humanities, of which he was a leading light, proud of Ireland, of which he was a patriot, and perhaps especially proud of his former student, Dr. Gary Munnelly, who has been both the technical architect and technical lead of this project since 2019. The elegance of our technical architecture and the respect for archival structure, which is the cornerstone of all the trust we have gained from our partners, is Gary's achievement, and it should be celebrated today and long into the future. Gary has also made certain that Shay is ever present in the virtual record treasury and in its source code. Every time any of us, anywhere in the world, queries the virtual record treasury of Ireland, a secret string of code returns your request with the message, "In memory of Professor Seamus Wallace." So thank you all again. This has been for me, I think, probably the privilege of my lifetime. And I now invite you all for the first time to join me as we re-enter the record treasury through the virtual record treasury of Ireland. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. It still gives us a thrill on the project team to see that video, so the hairs on the back of my neck are still going. We're honoured to be joined today by Minister Catherine Martin, Minister for Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sports and Media. Beyond 2022 is supported by the Minister's Department under Project Ireland 2040 as part of the Decade of Centenaries programme 2012 to 2023. Over 5 years, through many meetings and countless emails, we've benefited from the careful advice, the guidance and the encouragement of the Commemorations Unit in the Department. So we're delighted to have the Minister here with us today to address us. So please welcome Minister Catherine Martin.
And thank you, Peter, for that wonderful insight into the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland and its archival collections. As Kieran said, it really does send a shiver up your spine to see what is now available, and it's really astonishing to see what has been achieved. A hishi, a fríomhreithimh, a mabastora, a cheachtaí, a ifigach agus a cófartathe a tionscadal seo. Is lá iontoch atá an seo bhfuil deis agin siúl siar san agus brethnú len súla féin an méid atá laistí den cean den a fergnavis inti in star. Is mí an mehef nídig fehedó, scrisú cean de cartlan a mór na chorpa sa chatosí I gogu cara na heran. Nura scrisí ifig na dafeid publi rinú lúrach agus janach de cheacht géad blin de gocaméid agus láv scrívaní. I would like to echo the Taoiseach in expressing my great appreciation to the Beyond 2022 team who have embraced this project with such enthusiasm, vision, imagination and care. I would also like to thank the core archival partners and participating institutions for your generosity in sharing your archives, time, expertise and resources. Your partnership has immensely enriched the project's potential, and it is an inspiring and enduring legacy for our decade of centenaries supported by my department under the Project Ireland 2040. Throughout the decade of centenaries, the word legacy has been a focus for public conversation and personal reflection. The traumatic legacy of the Civil War and the suffering, loss and deep wounds that resonated deeply within families and communities through the generations are now being properly examined and discussed. The Decade of Centenaries has gifted us with a wealth of resources at our fingertips, such as the Virtual Record Treasury, to help us to engage with our history, grounded in the factual evidence for the events that occurred. We are remembering, examining and talking about the formative historical events that are so important to us on this island in an honest and respectful way, supported by the guiding principles of the Expert Advisory Group on Centenary Commemorations. My focus as Minister with responsibility for leading the Decade of Centenaries programme is to promote an open, inclusive and consultative approach to commemorations which seeks to strengthen peace and reconciliation across the island. I've encouraged a special focus on creative and cultural initiatives, including a new artist in residence scheme in some of our national cultural institutions, the military archives and the Beyond 2022 research project. I am delighted to see the work of Mairead McLean, the Beyond 2022 artist in residence, showcased today. Mairead's creative response is so important in making the rich primary source material of the archival collections accessible and engaging for new audiences. Her creative journey with the project is a powerful testament to the important contribution of artists across all genres. I'm particularly moved by how Mairead has drawn on the Japanese philosophy of kintsugi, which, when reflecting on the scale and ambition of this archival restoration project, what is damaged and broken can be repaired. The resulting scars and flaws elevate what has been recreated into something unique, enduring, and beautiful. Nothing is truly lost forever. We will close our proceedings this morning with an extract of her work, which I'm very much looking forward to. I must commend the staff of the National Archives for their extraordinary conservation work on the 1920-22 salved records under the leadership of Zoe Reid and with the Beyond 2022 project conservator Jessica Baldwin. It's fair to say that what has been achieved is nothing short of miraculous. Every restored fragment adds layers of meaning to our knowledge and understanding of our history. One of the great legacies of the decade of centenaries is a richer understanding and appreciation of the important contribution of women in shaping our past. Often for the first time, a light has been shone on women's experiences and influence in the significant historical events that shaped our journey towards independence and self-determination. Women were conducting research in the Public Record Office from the early years, both as scholars and as paid genealogists. Isabel Grubb, the Irish Quaker historian, was one such scholar who used its collections extensively in the autumn of 1915. Some of her carefully typewritten notes were returned to the Record Office following the fire. They show an interest in social and economic life in Ireland at a time when political and military matters and the history of states predominated in academia. Isabel's notes about records that were subsequently destroyed in the fire touch on all aspects of everyday life across the towns of 18th century Ireland, including Limerick, Cork, Dublin, Waterford, Kilkenny, and Armagh. She referenced, for example, a petition of 1721 from Limerick to the Irish Parliament, then situated at College Green, for relief of the poor who flock to the city on account of dearth and mortality of cattle. I'm particularly interested in what we can learn from the recovered archives about women's experiences and lives over the past 7 centuries. Wills, testamentary collections are a key source where the voices of women are directly heard even from centuries ago in a patriarchal society. The records show us that widows had a degree of autonomy in choosing how to live and how they wished to dispose of their possessions after death. The inventories of goods in wills provide a fascinating insight into everyday social circumstances and material culture, also illuminating how women's experiences varied depending on social position, wealth, and personal circumstances. Women in different stages of life had very different opportunities, and the archival discoveries of Beyond 2022 show how widows had autonomy to make arrangements for their estates and interests. 2 of the very original wills to miraculously survive the blaze concern female testators. In 1748, Elizabeth Clark, wife of Gabriel Clark, a merchant of Dublin, proved her will in Dublin. It's so interesting to see the personal gifts and bequests described in this document. To Catherine Saul, Elizabeth granted her snuff box, toothpick case, and nutmeg case. To her maidservant, Elizabeth Carl, she left £5 and half a dozen of her second-best shifts and cloth aprons and her green taffety nightgown. To her brother-in-law, she left a field bed and bedding. Herbert Wood, Assistant Deputy Keeper of Public Records, and his colleagues were ejected from the Record Office at Easter 1922, when the occupation of the Four Courts began. In early July, he returned to survey the scale of the destruction. We can only imagine his shock and despair at the scene that confronted him. At one blow, the records of centuries have passed into oblivion, he wrote. His immediate instinct, however, was to pick up the scattered fragments and begin the process of exploring what could be salvaged from the charred remains. Following his retirement in 1923, Wood returned to England and spent the rest of his life pursuing archival materials in the auction houses of London to replace what was lost in 1922. Many volumes of this kind were purchased at Sotheby's in the 1930s under his guidance, and these have been digitized and returned to their virtual shelves for this centenary moment. Despite the tragedy of their destruction 100 years ago, Ireland is privileged by global standards to have an astonishingly deep, rich and multifaceted archival heritage stretching back centuries. Dedicated archivists and librarians across the island and around the world have custodianship of this important heritage. By connecting this wealth of material digitally through the Virtual Record Treasury, the story of Ireland's deep history can be illuminated and made accessible for everyone to delve into and explore. Together, we can begin to recover our lost collective memories. Déanam cogorgeous live fad as an écht fór seo is aireacht bharcanacht agus bheoga í seo dar ne blian de covora céad blian. Gur míle maithagah go léir.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister Martin, for those encouraging words. We're in, as Minister Martin said, we're in for another treat now. Over the past 12 months, Mairead McLean, our Decade of Centenaries Artist in Residence, has been working closely with our research team. Mairead has visited our core partners in Belfast, Dublin and London. She has travelled deep into Ireland's archival past. She's even been down a salt mine, literally, to reimagine what was lost and how the memory of 1922 still reverberates today. So please sit back and enjoy some brief excerpts from her moving image creative work entitled The Nick of Time. Well, what better note could there be to end on? It only remains for me to thank very sincerely the Taoiseach, Minister Martin, and the Provost most sincerely for joining us here today, to thank our colleagues in the Castle and our ISL interpreters Orla and Shelley for their work this morning, and then to thank all of you here in Dublin Castle and watching us online for your partnership, your interest and your support to date. We look forward to pursuing our research and collaboration with all of you as together we continue in our mission to make Ireland's deep history accessible to all. Thank you all very much.